Welcome to the Alcohol Addiction Podcast. My name is Davy. I'm not an alcoholic. I refuse to be anonymous. I'm someone who doesn't drink alcohol. I spend every waking moment helping other people do the same. It's 10:49, Wednesday, the 14th of November, and I'm at home alone. Ooh, doesn't happen that often. Just took my little darling to school, and she's just had her first ever school photographs. She really misses her mum and dad, though. She cries like when I drop her off, and that's quite tough. I have to just kind of say to her, right, I'm going now. But I think it's super important that she learns to, operate in life without her mum and her dad. And, it's just a classic case of pain and suffering on both counts, right? When I drop her off, when her mum drops her off, we feel suffering because we see our daughter suffering, and she's suffering because she doesn't want to be apart from her mum and dad. But like most suffering that we go through, it's pretty much, it can be not pretty much most of suffering we go through, but there is a lot of suffering that we go through that is momentarily. It comes and it goes. And the human machine, Mother Nature, has designed a mind and a body to be able to deal with some of the most horrendous forms of pain and suffering you can imagine. I interviewed a professional poker player when I was in Malta recently called Andreas Heuvold. And when Andreas was 21, he crashed his car, killed the lady who was in the other car that hit him in the head-on collision. He ended up breaking every bone in his body. He was telling me how his left knee went straight through his leg and shattered his hip bone. And his right leg went straight through his ribs, shattered all of his ribs on his right-hand side and broke his back in two places. And that his jaw hit the steering wheel with so much power that it bent it. And later on in life, he tried to recreate the bend in the steering wheel with a sledgehammer and couldn't do it. And he said that he was there in the car when the fire brigade came to cut him out. He was like, just kill me, just shoot me. He went to prison. He went to prison and spent 5 months in prison. He was in solitary confinement a lot because he kept coming out to do his physiotherapy, and they thought he was bringing drugs in, so they kept stripping him naked and leaving him in cells for 9 hours at a time. And then he gets out eventually, and he falls in love, has a baby, and then his child dies at 3 months old. And then he falls in love again, and then goes through a horrific divorce. And it was just a catalogue of a litany of like pain and suffering like you could never imagine, particularly being a parent. And there he was, as I was interviewing him, telling me that the pain that he was in that moment that I was interviewing was the equivalent of having a broken arm. And he'd been like that for like 20 odd years. And it just gave me a little bit of a wake up call, like, yeah, it's tough paying the bills. Yeah, it's tough having a bit of debt. Yeah, it's tough with my bad back. Yeah, it's tough not having anywhere to live. But this guy, and he still managed to have this goal in his mind that he would make millions playing poker, because poker was the only thing that he could do because of his physical constraints, and he did it, and he continues to do it. So I know I took a bit of a leap there from dropping our kids off from school to someone breaking every bone in their body and losing a child. But I guess my point is, we all drink alcohol, and we're going to talk about this today, actually. We all drink alcohol as a way to reduce pain and suffering somewhere in our life, or move away from pain and suffering and towards pleasure. And really, the key to all this, just a simple craving. So a simple craving can be suffering for someone. But the way to get around it is not to run away from it. It's to experience it. It's to understand that we have the capability to get through that moment. We have the capability to get through anything. And, Andreas, the guy that I interviewed, he eventually became addicted to opioids. I imagine after going through all that pain and suffering that he went through, asking the fire brigade to shoot him, feeling the depth of despair of having his dead child in his hands, I bet he still didn't think that it was any pain or suffering worse than going through opioid withdrawal at the time that he went through it. And he told me he found it horrendous. And so we just need to remember our capabilities. We need to test them. We need to test what we're capable of. Think back to pain and suffering that we've been through, or test it. What's the worst that's going to happen? If you are not somebody who is wholly dependent on alcohol, and you will know that because your doctor would have told you, and if you don't know that, go to your doctor, don't listen to me. If you're like me and everybody else on Strive, then you can experiment and feel what it's like to feel a craving. I can tell you it ain't that bad. All right, that's why I took 5 minutes on that to talk about. We had a really, really fantastic second online live meetup of Strivers on Sunday. I thought it was absolutely amazing. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank every single one of them, particularly Craig, who turned up on an oil rig somewhere in an ocean somewhere, and 99.9% of people taking the intensive or the life-changing experience turned up for the meeting, and it was amazing. It was amazing, and I really felt like I'm doing the right thing here, creating a movement of 1 million people. It really felt like an epiphanal moment, So we're going to keep that going every 2 weeks, and if you want to get involved in that, then you do need to be a member of the intensive. So get over to the Truth About Alcohol to check out how to join that. We are running a Truth About Alcohol taster on December the 1st. As I've said on previous podcast episode, Craig, the guy on the oil rig, is giving away 2 free tickets to the taster in December. So he's giving away 2 £49 experiences. Now, all you have to do to get a seat is to write to Craig at truthaboutalcohol@gmail.com explaining why he should give you the ticket. Why is it important that we help you become someone who doesn't drink alcohol? And we will pick a winner on Saturday the 17th of November. We've got 2 seats there. Now, I'll be honest with you. I have written to 500 people, and I have spoke about this on 2 or 3 podcasts, and only 1 person so far has responded. Now, that tells me that the audience that I think I have isn't the audience that I think I have, or, which is more likely, nobody wants to take on the tough, challenging goal of not drinking alcohol in December, because December is a month where we drink the most alcohol. If that is the case, and you're worried about that, and you really don't want to take on this challenge in December, then how about we give away 5 free months? I don't know why I can't say free. 5 free months of Strive membership and a taster. All right. So someone's already wrote to us. So we already know that 1 person is going to get a taster if nobody else writes in. If you want a month free membership from Strive, then again, write to us, just letting us know why we should help you become someone who doesn't drink alcohol, and then we'll make a decision on Saturday. All right, how does that sound? Okay, now on to today's podcast, episode 164. People like us do things like this. Now, if you are a student of or are aware of the work of Seth Godin, and Seth Godin, if he ever listens to this, might give me a bollock in here for screwing himself. But I look at Seth as being a brand stroke marketing stroke life genius, right? And Seth uses the term people like us do things like this a lot when he talks about how our customers in businesses operate and why they do the things that they do. He always says people like us do things like this. And I pinch a lot of Seth's ideas, phrases, concepts, blog posts, because so many of them marry up with this journey of being someone who doesn't drink alcohol. And this one is exactly the same, and I'll tell you why. In the last couple of days, I've listened to 2 podcasts, one that I finished, one that I'm in the middle of. The one that I finished was Russell Brand's Under the Skin podcast, and his guest was Gabor Mate, okay? Gabor Mate is the author of the book. I mean, he's the author of a lot of books, but the one book that gets talked about the most recently is, and I'll just have a look online for it, In the Realm of the Hungry ghosts, okay? And the other podcast that I've been listening to is Sam Harris's Waking Up podcast. And he's talking to Johann Hari. And Johann Hari is the author of Chasing the Scream. But the reason that Johann is on Sam's podcast, as I just look online again, is that he has a new book out called Lost Connections, which is all about depression, okay? And Johann Hari also has a great TED Talk, which we used to use in the life-changing experience, and we talk about in the intensive, okay? So what Gabor Mate, and you should listen to both of those podcasts, not just those episodes, but you should subscribe to the Under the Skin podcast by Russell Brand. You should subscribe to Sam Harris podcast, Waking Up, because they're fantastic, right? Let's have a drink of tea. Now, Gabor Mate and Russell Brand talked about a variety of different things, but the crux of where Gabor's coming from is that all addiction is rooted in childhood trauma, okay? And he even goes further than childhood trauma and takes it back to the womb. Trauma in the womb. Now, listening to Gabor talk about this, it's not the first time I've heard it. I've heard it before, but I can't for the life of me remember where. I don't know if it was Joe Dispenza or who it was. But I read a great book before I heard Gabor talk to Russell Brand about it, where they were producing scientific evidence to suggest that external environmental factors that were affecting, turn my WhatsApp off because that's just dinked, that were affecting the woman carrying the child physiologically, okay, and psychologically, was having an effect on the baby or the fetus within in the womb, right? And when you think about it, that kind of makes sense. So if you are drinking a lot of alcohol while you're pregnant, then that is going to affect your entire body, and your fetus is part of your body at that point. If you are stressed, your body is going to feel that stress. Every part of that body is going to feel that stress, and so will the fetus, because your fetus is there as well. And I remember when Liza and I were, when Liza was carrying Zia, we were well into Game of Thrones, you know, and Liza would put a pair of headphones on her belly plugged into classical music, so Zia could listen to classical music and not the screams of White Walkers getting slayed by Jon Snow. And this was after we had read this book, and also when we got into a conflict situation, or I got angry with Liza over something, Liza would always have to remind me, look, Lee, this is not something that we want to subject Zia to. And I think, look, whether or not you believe the scientific studies or not, I think it doesn't take any greater effort to believe in these things to not believe in them. And I think to believe in it, that your environment is going to affect your child in your womb and how they develop when they get older, I don't think it's a bad thing, because it will then ear you towards a side of sorting your life out and creating a better environment, which will reduce your stress and anxiety, and the stress and anxiety of what, in this case, I'm saying you as in me, your wife carrying a baby. So I do kind of like think those things are important. However, I do want to offer up a different point of view to Gabor's, not disregarding Gabor's points. I want to stress that I think Gabor's points, obviously he's very experienced, his research, all the work he's done on this will bear, will likely show that what he's talking about is correct. But I want to have a different opinion on it. And then Johann Hari talks to Sam Harris about his book, Chasing the Scream, starting off with. I haven't finished the podcast yet, but he's talking about Chasing the Scream at the moment, talking about how the opposite of addiction is connection, or a loss of connection. And that if you want to beat your addiction, then you need to learn to develop connections. And then his second book now is Lost Connections. He's talking about depression and anxiety, and how that leads into a loss of connection, which then ultimately leads to addiction. Okay, so two very experienced, very thoroughly researched individuals creating literature, brands, lifestyles, businesses, whatever you want to call it, based on different sort of philosophies around how addiction happens. And there's a lot more philosophies out there, isn't there? You know, Alcoholics Anonymous believe that alcoholism is a genetic disorder, that you inherited your genes from your parents, or your parents' parents, or your parents' 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 parents, and that it's a genetic thing. All right. And then you have people like Maya Salovich, which I think has the most sensible approach. And Johan Hari says this as well, which is like, it's a mixture of everything. It's a mixture of biology. It's a mixture of culture, society, and worldview. It's a mixture of environment, a mixture of psychology, etc., etc. I think that's about right. But I want to focus on Gabor Mate a little bit here. And I want to focus on his assertion that our addiction is tied up with our childhood trauma. Now, when my mother first fell pregnant with me, she was 17 years of age in a relationship with some guy who left her when she told him that she was pregnant with me. So she went through a lot of trauma. If you're 17 and you're umming and ahhing about whether to have an abortion, which she was, umming and ahhing whether or not to allow your own parents to adopt you, so my mother would have been my sister. When you're umming and ahhing to just offload me because you don't know if you can cope and you're going to be alone, and you're bringing a bastard in the world, which in the 70s is a bad idea. So much so that her parents didn't even accompany her in the labour room when she was having me. So my mum had nobody to hold her hand other than the midwife, who she didn't know from Adam. And I was born in the world screaming and kicking out of the body of a very, very frightened young teenage girl, right? That is traumatic. And I imagine that I would have suffered a lot of trauma in the womb, right? Because my mum would have had a lot of trauma. And then, as I get older, for my childhood, I remember learning that my father wasn't my real father, trauma. I remember learning that my real father was Chinese when I so wanted to be white because I was being raised in a very, very white neighborhood with no colored people, no Asian people, nothing. Trauma. And I remember my mom and dad moving me from Manchester to Ogmore Vale. So a big thriving city like Manchester in England to a tiny little Welsh mining village of 3,000 people where they didn't even have a school football team. I had to leave all my friends behind and all my football and everything. Trauma, all right? And I remember that trauma more than any other trauma in my life. And then when I get there, because I'm Chinese and because I'm English, right? And because the way Welsh hate the English and because everybody in my school just thought I was different, I ended up getting picked on and fighting. Trauma, right? So, you could say, because I've been addicted to everything, that Gabor's right. That it all leads back to my childhood trauma. But I want to go back a little bit, back into my childhood again. All right? Well, not into my childhood. I want to go into my son's childhood a little bit. So Jude is 17 now, and it's easier to watch Jude than it is to remember when I was 17 because I'm losing my memory. And me and Jude talk about alcohol a lot because his dad knows, he knows his dad is someone who's trying to create a movement of 1 million people who doesn't drink alcohol. He knows that I don't want him to drink alcohol, and he knows that if he does, I want him to drink as responsibly as he can, given the fact that alcohol is a powerful drug that's going to make him want to drink more. All right? And he is caught in a real dilemma. I would say he's been drinking on and off since he was 15. He's now 17, right? Nearly 18 in February. And Jude's dilemma is that although he understands everything I'm telling him, and you've got to be fair here, that me talking to him regularly about alcohol, he is suffering from the death effect here as well. I'm aware of that. But you can only suffer from the death effect, I believe, if you are actually addicted to this stuff. And I think that one of the reasons Jude doesn't drink a lot, but he can't stop. And he's told me, like, it's not that he can't stop, he's told me he doesn't want to stop. And I actually believe that someone saying they don't want to stop is pretty much roughly the same as can't stop, all right, in my opinion. And when I look at that, I think to myself, wow, I realize how quickly the psychological addiction got its hook into Jude. Very, very quickly. When I sit down and ponder this, and I ponder how long this psychological hook, how long it took him to become addicted to alcohol. And there might be a lot of people listening to this arguing that because Jude hardly drinks alcohol, he's not addicted to it. But I would assert that if he can't stop, or he doesn't want to stop, then for me, there is a reliance on drinking this substance that he doesn't really want to drink because it is providing him with some value or perceived value in his life or pleasure in his life. And that to me is an addiction. It might not be the addiction that you're used to thinking in your mind of the guy who screwed up his life, lost his wife and his kids, and he's now just a fucking raving pisshead. But it's still an addiction all the same because he can't stop. Now, I would assert, going even further back than this, that Jude was actually hooked on alcohol before he even had a drink. The reasons why he can't stop drinking now existed before he even had a drink. Because as Jude grew up and as Jude grew up and his subconscious started to create a framework about how you should live as an adult, and that is continuing today. I had a dinner with him yesterday. We were talking about his A-levels and possible career opportunities, and he's looking at me, what I do for a living, and you know, we're talking about that, and that is slowly building up his framework and a blueprint around how and what he could potentially do when it comes to work. Well, when he was creating that part of his blueprint that said, what do I as a young boy need to do in order to become an effective young man in society, then a part of that blueprint, a big part of that blueprint was, I will have to drink alcohol. Like, I will have to socialize, and during socializing I will have to drink alcohol. Okay, now that is before he's even had a drink. So for me, the addiction goes even further back than him having a drink. It's nothing to do with the physical addiction of alcohol. He's already hooked. He's been designed to drink alcohol from birth, right? Now, why does this tie in with Gabor Mate and Johan Hari? It's because everybody that comes to Strive is asked the same question by myself and the moderators when they start posting on Strive, when they take the taster and when they take the intensive. Why do you drink alcohol? The first assignment in the taster, if anyone's taken the December taster, is the 3 W's. Why are you taking it? Why are you drinking? What for? Who is it? Who is it for? I can't even remember my own 3 W's. It's why are you drinking? Why do you want to stop now? And who are you stopping for? They're the 3 W's. There you are. It's early in the morning. So, and when people think about why they drink alcohol, they think a little bit like Gabor Mate and Johan Hari, right? They start thinking about depression, anxiety. They start thinking about trauma. They start thinking about how they can't deal with life. They start thinking about how they can't socialize without it. They talk about how they need to reduce their inhibitions, that how much they like the taste of it, and it makes them feel good. The buzz. I mean, God, I can't tell you how many people talk about they drink alcohol because of this fabled buzz. There's so many. To block out the voices in their mind. And these voices are telling them that they're rubbish, not good enough, etc., etc. There's all these reasons why people don't drink alcohol, okay? Why people drink alcohol. Why they're addicted. Which Johan Hari and the likes could look at and say, well, there's no connection there. And and they're suffering from depression and anxiety, and society's not designed to help them. And Gabor can say, well, let's sit them down on the couch and talk to them, and it will lead back to some childhood trauma. And if we fix that childhood trauma, or we understand it better, then we'll understand the addiction more. But when you think about it, you're going to be hard-pressed not to find a kid who has had childhood trauma. You're going to find it hard-pressed to find a human being that has not had some anxiety and some depression. I count myself as being a pretty rounded, switched-on individual, and every other couple of days I feel quite depressed. I don't take antidepressants for it or anything like that. For me, I just think that it's part of my natural state and part of being a human being, and I kind of get through it, And I'm not downplaying the fact that there are people out there that have had hugely traumatic experiences: incest, rape, murder, loss of children. I'm not downplaying severe depression where people are suicidal because they cannot deal with life, right? That is not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is what works for me and how I think and how I feel. And I'm hoping by talking and telling my story, or the stories that I have come across or strive or true about alcohol, that someone relates to it. All right, super important. Now, putting this all together, all right, I believe that we miss a really super important point when it comes to addiction with alcohol, and that is Seth Godin. And Seth Godin's assertion that people like us do things like this. When I stopped drinking alcohol in 2009, and I went through what I call the 7 sins of sobriety, which are things like taste, boredom, social anxiety, quiet in the mind, all these different reasons why I think that I drink alcohol, it came down to a simple fact that the reason I drank alcohol was not because of all these perceived values, but because I was addicted to alcohol. And when I dug a little bit deeper as to why I was addicted to alcohol, I didn't pinpoint it to childhood trauma that I experienced when I was in Wales, or the trauma that I experienced in the womb because of my parents. I found it a lot simpler than that. I drank alcohol and became addicted to it because people like us do things like this. When you're raised in Ogmore Vale in South Wales, people who live in Ogmore Vale in South Wales drink alcohol. That's what they do. And when you drink a powerful poison, a powerful drug, one of the top 5 most addictive drugs in the world, and you drink it and you consume it to the degrees that people in South Wales, people in South Wales do, then it is likely you're going to become addicted to it. All right? Now, it is really important to understand that you're not an addict just because you admit you're an addict. My mum and dad would never admit they're addicted to alcohol. But of course they're addicted to alcohol because they have fucking been banging it down their neck for 5 decades, and if they tried to stop, they wouldn't be able to. It has become an ingrained part of their life. They need it to function. Without it, they would likely lose life. They would likely, their mortality would decrease because they wouldn't have the ability to replace their alcohol with some other forms of meaning and purpose in their life. They would be so convinced that alcohol is really enjoyable that to give it up would be a real problem for them. But they're not addicts. They don't define themselves as addicts. Nobody would say they're an addict. I could name every single one of my buddies who I used to drink with. They're all addicted to alcohol. But if you asked them if they were addicted to alcohol, they would say no. They're not sitting on psychotherapist couches. They're not turning up at the doctors saying they have a problem with alcohol. They're not ending up even in hospital with their liver complaints because they're not going to get there for another 10, 20 years. So there is a large swathe of people who live in South Wales who are addicted to alcohol that the world doesn't even know they're addicted to. And they don't even know they're addicted or believe they're addicted. And it has nothing to do with childhood trauma, it has nothing to do with depression, it has nothing to do with anxiety, it has nothing to do with rape, murder, incest, loss of life. It has nothing to do with the fact that they lost their job. It has nothing to do with the fact that every time they look in the mirror they think they're fucking ugly. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're low self-worth. It has nothing to do with they're fat, they're too thin, they're too tall, they're too short. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with the fact that people like us do things like this. We drink alcohol because everybody drinks alcohol. Because alcoholism is an invisible, violent and dominant belief system. All right? And it's not just in South Wales. There are people on Strive from Australia, New Zealand, America, East Coast and West Coast, and in the middle. Such a big place. Canada. We've had people from South Africa. We've had people from Greece. We've had people from Spain. All right? We've had people from Ireland. Everybody, Scotland, Wales, and England. And the same themes come up. People like us do things like this. When you go through the intensive and the taster and you talk about and you share about your childhood experiences, the vast majority of people started drinking when they were really young because they felt that that is what they should do. That was a normal thing to do. Okay? Now, there are people on Strive that didn't happen for. If you would have listened to Andrew, who is a moderator, talk recently on the podcast, Andrew found alcohol very late in life. And where he grew up in Canada, it wasn't the same environment that we have in the UK. That is going to happen. But a vast majority of us, I'm talking to you, the people who grew up in the Welsh Valleys like I did, the people who grew up in Reddish, Stockport where I grew up, the people who grew up in Melbourne, Sydney, Auckland, Dublin, Manchester, wherever, that you relate to what I'm saying, that the reason you drank alcohol is because everybody else around you drank it and you didn't even know what you was fucking doing until it hit you 20, 30, 40 years later that you might have a bit of a problem and then you tried to stop and you couldn't. That's who I'm talking to right now, okay? The reason that we have the Gabor Mates of the world and the Russell Brands of the world and the Johan Haris of the world and the AAs of the world is because we need them. Alcoholism needs them, for one. We need them because there are so many people who need help. But alcoholism needs them as well. Because, think about it, okay? I am someone who realizes that I drink alcohol and become addicted to it because people where I grew up were designed from birth to do that, to behave in that way. And I just followed the rules and I just blended in and did what everybody else did. And then when I understood that and I learned the truth about alcohol and alcoholism, that alcoholism is an invisible, violent and dominant belief system, not a byproduct of drinking too much alcohol. And alcohol isn't normal and pleasurable. It is a powerful poison that kills 3.3 million people a year, more than war, terrorism and homicide combined. When I learned and understood that, and I coupled that to the fact that alcohol provides you with no long-term value, then I was able to stop drinking very, very easily, despite knocking it back like nobody's business for 2 decades. And yes, I did say I found it easy. And if you want to run away from Strive, if you want to turn off the Alcohol Addiction podcast, if you want to never join the Taste or the Intensive because you think I won't get you, because you think that it is so difficult to stop drinking alcohol, and I haven't got a clue because obviously it was so easy for me. Now let me tell you this, that is alcoholism. That is the invisible, violent and dominant belief system. The resistance, which is a key part of alcoholism, needs you to believe that the reason you drink alcohol is not because you were brainwashed to do it from birth, that because you've got childhood trauma, that because you have so many things wrong with you, that it will take thousands upon thousands of pounds of rehab, it will take thousands upon thousands of hours of sitting on expensive shrinks couches, okay? Because that is the only way you can be fixed. Because if you agree otherwise, that the only reason you drink alcohol is because people like us do things like this. And if people like us drink a powerfully addictive drug, then we're going to become addicted to it. If you agree that simplicity, if you agree that alcoholism is an invisible, violent, dominant belief system, that alcohol has no value, if you can believe all that and you can give up very, very quickly, then you have been a bit of a dickhead for the entire life, because you have actually thought that drinking alcohol has been providing with all these benefits. Look, folks, another Seth Godin one here. Status, ego. All right? We cannot, we will not, we refuse to accept that we have been blindly drinking a poison that's provided us with no value, wasting all our money and all our life and all our relationships, and destroying us internally and externally, biologically and psychologically. We will refuse point blank to admit that we have done all that for no reason. We have to make it complicated. We have to tie it to trauma. We have to say that we are different. That we are different than Lee Davy, that there is something really, really wrong with me, and it is really, really difficult for me to give this up. Alcoholism needs you to believe that, because if you believe that, the odds are stacked against you quitting, and you will keep on drinking, and your brain and your body and everything will just keep on going on. The status quo will remain, and I can tell you this, folks, we are human beings are bored change that much that we would rather be a fucked up mess addicted to alcohol than try to stop drinking alcohol and get on with our life and try to make a positive change and be different. Because we are comfortable in this skin. We are comfortable in the puke. We're comfortable in the shit. We're comfortable in the semen. We're comfortable lying next to complete fucking strangers. All right? We are comfortable with that. As much pain as that provides us, it is nowhere near as painful as it's going to be when we decide to stop drinking alcohol. And that's why we don't. All right? Gabor Mate. Okay? Johan Hari. Absolutely phenomenal resources. You should listen to them. You should understand them. You should take everything they're saying on board. But you should also listen to Seth Godin, okay? That people like us do things like this. It doesn't always have to be difficult. Everything normally, the answer to most things is far simpler than we think. Right, now I'm going to go. And please, 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 pretty please, with a cherry on top, do yourself a favour and join the December taster. And if you don't want to join it, buy it as a gift for someone for Christmas. Don't go out there buying a jumper or a pair of shoes or some other piece of shit that people don't need, that is contributing to destroying the earth. Just don't do that. Yeah? Buy them something that is going to be really valuable, an experience that's going to change their life. Right, I'm going to shut up. Off my soapbox. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.